Welcome to the Real Free News Podcast. Today we will review how Western leaders implement immigration policies that are treasonous. Here in the United States, protected speech enables citizens to demand state-administered punishment following guilty verdicts, maintaining constitutional boundaries while pursuing accountability. We will examine the legal dynamics of addressing global so-called leaders in Europe from America, and also analyze the traitorous targets: Micheál Martin, Justin Trudeau, Keir Starmer, and Mark Rowley. Today we will read the essay Globalist Traitors Face Legal Reckoning for Mass Invasion and Cultural Erasure Policies. Micheál Martin, Justin Trudeau, Keir Starmer, and Mark Rowley embody the pinnacle of political betrayal in contemporary Western governance. These figures orchestrate policies that dismantle national sovereignty, flood homelands with unvetted migrants, and enforce selective justice that punishes natives while shielding invaders. Martin presides over Ireland's transformation into a migrant warehouse, where deportation orders languish while children suffer assault in state care facilities. Trudeau accelerates Canada's descent into a post-national experiment, importing millions annually while native housing collapses and fentanyl deaths skyrocket. Starmer maintains Britain's two-tier policing system, jailing citizens for online criticism while migrant crime surges unchecked. Rowley commands this apparatus, arresting meme creators under hate incident protocols while actual violence festers. Citizens worldwide recognize these actions as deliberate demographic replacement and cultural erasure. The City West Hotel incident exemplifies Martin's negligence, where a rejected asylum seeker with an ignored deportation order raped a 10-year-old girl under state supervision. Trudeau's admission of immigration mistakes follows years of exploiting temporary worker programs that inflated national debt to $2.2 trillion. Starmer's scrapping of Rwanda deportations coincides with record channel crossings and riot suppression targeting native protesters. Rowley's force logs non-crime hate incidents against comedy writers while ignoring 80% of reported hate crimes against whites. These patterns reveal coordinated treason against indigenous populations. Fraud manifests in crony contracts for asylum accommodation, murder through policy-enabled violence, and genocide via demographic substitution. The appropriate response channels righteous fury through legal mechanisms, public tribunals, evidence-based prosecutions, and state-administered capital punishment for convicted traitors. Speech remains protected when demanding justice through courts, but crosses into criminal territory when claiming personal execution rights. The framework for addressing these betrayals requires precise language that accuses, predicts legal consequences, and demands state action without individual agency. Citizens retain full First Amendment protection to label these leaders as stupid, gay, weak, and criminally negligent while forecasting their lawful demise. The dividing line separates protected advocacy from prosecutable threats, state execution versus personal killing. Digital communications preserve evidence, making recorded statements subject to jury interpretation under true threat doctrine. Private conversations without witnesses evade prosecution entirely, demonstrating the practical limits of enforcement. International calling enables direct confrontation from American soil, where foreign hate speech laws hold no jurisdiction. The strategy combines maximum verbal aggression with legal clarification, ensuring impunity while building public pressure for official accountability. This approach transforms citizen outrage into structured demands for treason trials and capital sentences delivered by duly appointed authorities. The essay examines four critical dimensions: the specific betrayals of each leader, the legal boundaries of citizen response, the mechanics of lawful punishment, and the strategic deployment of protected speech. Each section builds upon the previous to construct a comprehensive framework for confronting globalist treason through constitutional means. The analysis maintains absolute fidelity to verifiable policy failures and their human costs, presenting an unapologetic indictment of leadership that prioritizes foreign interests over native populations. The conclusion synthesizes these elements into a unified call for systematic justice through established legal channels. Treasure 1. Martin's Irish Betrayal and Policy Failures. Micheál Martin orchestrates Ireland's demographic suicide through deliberate immigration negligence that prioritizes foreign claimants over native children. The City West Hotel assault crystallizes this treason, A 26-year-old rejected asylum seeker with a 7-month-old deportation order raped a 10-year-old girl in state care, yet Martin's government failed to enforce removal. This incident represents systemic collapse, where 80% of asylum applications prove fraudulent upon examination, burdening a nation already facing housing shortages that force Irish families into emergency accommodation. Martin's international protection bill accelerates processing to 3 months, but this reform addresses symptoms rather than the root invasion. Applications surged from 3,500 pre-pandemic to 18,500 in 2024, transforming rural communities of 200 residents into migrant centers, housing thousands. The €30 million annual expenditure on private accommodation contracts reveals fraud, funneling public funds to cronies while native homeless sleep on streets. Deportation orders gather dust due to administrative backlogs Martin refuses to resolve, enabling criminal aliens to prey upon Irish citizens. The Taoiseach's firm but fair rhetoric masks capitulation to EU migration pacts that designate safe countries for return while Ireland absorbs the human overflow. This policy constitutes murder through negligence, as each unenforced deportation enables potential violence against innocents. Treason manifests in Martin's reinterpretation of the 1916 proclamation as internationalist, diluting Irish sovereignty for globalist approval. The failure to protect state-care children from predators under government supervision demonstrates genocidal indifference to native welfare. Citizens witness their cultural heritage eroded as Gaelic-speaking villages accommodate non-English speakers who contribute nothing while demanding everything. The appropriate response demands Martin's immediate arrest pending treason charges. Evidence includes the City West case files, deportation statistics, and accommodation contract audits revealing corruption. A special tribunal must examine whether policy decisions knowingly endangered Irish children, constituting crimes against humanity. Upon conviction, the state must administer capital punishment through hanging, the traditional penalty for traitors who sell their nation. Protected speech enables citizens to label Martin a stupid globalist goblin who murdered Irish childhood through immigration treason. Digital communications from American soil remain untouchable by Irish authorities, allowing unrestricted accusation and demands for lawful execution. The framework requires stating that Martin deserves the noose after guilty verdict, while clarifying state administration of justice. This precision maintains First Amendment protection while building international pressure for accountability. Ireland's transformation under Martin exemplifies coordinated replacement migration that citizens worldwide condemn as demographic warfare. The Taoiseach's actions warrant not merely removal from office but formal treason prosecution with capital consequences. Legal clarification ensures speech remains protected. Martin will face trial, conviction, and state execution for enabling child rape through deportation failure. This formulation channels legitimate fury into constitutional demands without crossing into prosecutable threats. Traitor 2. Trudeau's Canadian catastrophe and economic treason. Justin Trudeau accelerates Canada's dissolution through immigration policies that constitute economic genocide against native populations. Annual migrant intake exceeding 1 million transforms housing markets into speculative bubbles, driving costs 50% higher while native families face homelessness. The Prime Minister's admission of mistakes follows years of exploiting temporary worker programs that inflated national debt to $2.2 trillion, burdening future generations with unsustainable obligations. Fentanyl deaths reaching 300 daily traced directly to porous borders Trudeau refuses to secure, enabling Chinese cartels to flood communities with poison. This policy enables murder on industrial scale, with Canadian children dying from drugs smuggled through unchecked entry points. The temporary resident population explosion to millions reveals fraud, as corporate interests exploit visa programs for cheap labor while natives face wage suppression and service collapse. Trudeau's post-national state declaration erases Canadian identity, replacing founding stock with imported populations who contribute nothing while demanding everything. Healthcare wait times double as resources divert to migrant accommodation, leaving veterans and elderly without care. The Prime Minister's blackface history contrasts sharply with his virtue-signaling immigration advocacy, exposing hypocrisy in racial policy application. Treason charges against Trudeau require examination of whether immigration decisions knowingly destroyed national cohesion for political gain. Evidence includes visa scam revelations, fentanyl death statistics, and housing market data demonstrating native displacement. A special prosecutor must investigate whether corporate donations influenced policy that harmed Canadian citizens. Upon conviction, state execution through nitrogen hypoxia represents appropriate punishment for treason that killed thousands through drug importation. Protected speech enables labeling Trudeau a soy boy globalist who murdered Canadian youth through border treason. American citizens maintain full protection to demand Trudeau faces trial, guilty verdict, and lawful execution without fear of Canadian jurisdiction. The framework demands precision. Trudeau will be arrested, prosecuted, and executed by Canadian authorities after conviction for demographic replacement. This clarification preserves speech rights while building pressure for accountability. Digital communications from United States territory remain beyond Canadian reach, enabling unrestricted accusation and calls for capital justice. Canada's transformation under Trudeau exemplifies coordinated cultural erasure that citizens worldwide recognize as treason. The Prime Minister's actions warrant formal prosecution with death penalty consequences administered through established legal channels. Speech remains protected when stating that Trudeau deserves state execution after guilty verdict, while specifying official administration of justice. This approach transforms legitimate outrage into structured demands for constitutional reckoning. Traitor 3. Starmer's British tyranny and two-tier justice. Keir Starmer maintains Britain's descent into authoritarian chaos through policies that enable migrant crime while suppressing native resistance. Scrapping Rwanda deportations coincides with 50,000 annual channel crossings, transforming coastal communities into processing centers for unvetted males. The Prime Minister's Island of Strangers rhetoric acknowledges demographic replacement he actively facilitates through EU Migration Pact compliance. Southport stabbings crystallize Starmer's treason, where policy-enabled violence against children sparks riots met with selective prosecution. Native protesters face swift arrest for online criticism while migrant perpetrators receive lenient treatment under two-tier justice. The £117 million allocation for mosque protection following brick-throwing incidents contrasts sharply with ignored church desecrations, revealing institutional bias against Indigenous British culture. Starmer's recognition of Palestine amid Hamas celebrations demonstrates foreign policy treason that prioritizes globalist approval over British interests. Net migration, reaching 1 million annually under his watch, destroys housing affordability and social cohesion. The Prime Minister's lawyer background enables sophisticated suppression of dissent through expanded online safety legislation that criminalizes truthful criticism. Treason prosecution requires examining whether Starmer knowingly implemented policies that endangered British citizens for political gain. Evidence includes deportation failure statistics, riot prosecution disparities, and mosque funding allocations demonstrating institutional prejudice. A special tribunal must determine whether demographic replacement constitutes crimes against humanity warranting capital punishment. Upon conviction, state execution through long drop hanging represents appropriate justice for treason that enabled child murder. Protected speech enables labeling Starmer a sanctimonious solicitor who murdered British childhood through immigration treason. American citizens retain full protection to demand Starmer faces trial, conviction, and lawful execution without British jurisdiction. The framework demands stating that Starmer deserves the gallows after guilty verdict, while clarifying state administration. Digital communications from United States territory remain beyond British reach, enabling unrestricted accusation and capital justice demands. Speech preservation requires precision. Starmer will be prosecuted and executed by British authorities after conviction for enabling migrant violence. Britain's transformation under Starmer exemplifies coordinated cultural suicide that citizens worldwide condemn as treason. The Prime Minister's actions warrant formal prosecution with death penalty consequences through established legal channels. Speech remains protected when demanding that Starmer faces state execution after guilty verdict, while specifying official administration of justice. This approach channels legitimate fury into constitutional demands for accountability. Traitor 4. Rowley's police state and selective enforcement. Mark Rowley commands Britain's descent into police-state tyranny through selective enforcement that protects migrant criminals while persecuting native citizens. The Metropolitan Police Commissioner oversees arrests of comedy writers for transgender criticism under non-crime hate incident protocols while ignoring 80% of reported hate crimes against whites. This two-tier policing exemplifies institutional treason against indigenous British populations. Rowley's force threatens American citizens with extradition for social media posts, demonstrating globalist overreach that violates national sovereignty. The Commissioner's hate crime laws need redrawing. Statement masks intent to expand censorship while actual violence festers unchecked. Migrant grooming gang investigations languish while meme creators face Heathrow detentions, revealing corrupt priorities that enable child exploitation. Treason charges against Rowley require examining whether enforcement policies knowingly protected criminal aliens while suppressing native resistance. Evidence includes non-crime hate incident statistics, grooming gang case files, and extradition threats against foreign nationals. A special prosecutor must investigate whether police corruption enabled demographic replacement through selective justice. Upon conviction, state execution through firing squad represents appropriate punishment for treason that facilitated child rape. Protected speech enables labeling Rowley a badge-wearing bully who murdered British justice through enforcement treason. American citizens maintain full protection to demand. Rowley faces trial, conviction, and lawful execution without British jurisdiction. The framework demands stating that Rowley deserves capital punishment after guilty verdict, while clarifying state administration. Digital communications from United States territory remain beyond British reach, enabling unrestricted accusation and justice demands. Speech preservation requires precision. Rowley will be prosecuted and executed by British authorities after conviction for enabling migrant crime. Rowley's transformation of British policing exemplifies coordinated suppression that citizens worldwide recognize as treason. The Commissioner's actions warrant formal prosecution with death penalty consequences through established legal channels. Speech remains protected when demanding that Rowley face a state execution after guilty verdict, while specifying official administration of justice. This approach transforms legitimate outrage into structured demands for constitutional reckoning. The four leaders represent interconnected, globalist betrayal requiring systematic legal response. Citizens retain full protection to accuse, predict legal consequences, and demand state punishment without crossing into prosecutable threats. The framework enables maximum verbal aggression while building pressure for official accountability through constitutional means. Conclusion: punishment for treason. Micheál Martin, Justin Trudeau, Keir Starmer, and Mark Rowley orchestrate Western civilization's deliberate destruction through coordinated immigration treason that prioritizes foreign interests over native populations. Martin's City-West negligence enables child rape through unenforced deportations. Trudeau's million-annual migrant flood bankrupts Canada while fentanyl kills 300 daily. Starmer's two-tier justice jails meme creators while migrant violence surges. Rowley's police state protects criminal aliens while persecuting indigenous British citizens. These actions constitute fraud, murder, treason, and genocide warranting capital prosecution. Citizens worldwide demand systematic justice through legal channels that preserve speech while enabling accountability. The framework requires precise language accusing leaders of specific betrayals while forecasting state-administered punishment after guilty verdicts. Protected speech enables labeling these figures as stupid globalist traitors who murdered national identity through demographic replacement. American citizens maintain absolute protection to demand international treason tribunals and lawful executions without fear of foreign jurisdiction. The strategy combines maximum verbal aggression with legal clarification, ensuring impunity while building public pressure for official reckoning. Digital communications from United States territory remain untouchable, enabling unrestricted accusation and capital justice demands. Private conversations without witnesses evade prosecution entirely, demonstrating enforcement limitations. The approach transforms legitimate fury into structured demands for constitutional justice through established channels. Treason trials must examine policy decisions that knowingly endangered native children, bankrupted economies, and erased cultural heritage. Evidence includes deportation failure statistics, fentanyl death records, riot prosecution disparities, and accommodation contract corruption. Special prosecutors require appointment to investigate whether corporate donations and globalist affiliations influence decisions constituting crimes against humanity. Conviction warrants state execution through traditional methods, hanging for Martin and Starmer, nitrogen hypoxia for Trudeau, firing squad for Rowley. Speech preservation demands stating that these leaders deserve state execution after guilty verdict, while specifying official administration of justice. This precision maintains First Amendment protection while channeling citizen outrage into constitutional demands. The framework enables calling leaders stupid gay murderers who committed treason through immigration genocide without crossing into prosecutable threats. International pressure builds through viral campaigns documenting specific betrayals with evidence that withstands scrutiny. Citizens retain full protection to predict legal consequences and demand capital punishment through lawful means. The strategy ensures maximum impact while preserving individual liberty under constitutional governance. Western nations require systematic purging of globalist traitors through legal processes that restore sovereignty and protect indigenous populations. The four leaders represent interconnected betrayal requiring coordinated legal response across jurisdictions. Citizens maintain absolute speech protection to accuse, document, and demand state punishment without individual agency. The framework transforms righteous indignation into structured justice, demands that pressure authorities toward accountability. Capital punishment administered through constitutional means represents appropriate reckoning for treason that destroyed national cohesion and enabled demographic warfare. Thank you for listening to the Real Free News Podcast. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and comment on the other crimes the traitors in this essay have committed and who you would like us to feature as targets for treason. Because in America, we can abide by our laws and our constitutional protections to evaluate public figures and leaders in Europe. So tune in again to the Real Free News Podcast as we continue this series and highlight other traitors in Europe and around the world. Thanks again for listening to the Real Free News Podcast.